A common criticism of Dragon Ball is that death has no meaning because, as we see all the time, characters can just come back to life with little to no consequence, making death more like a timeout than it is a permanent thing. I have my gripes with this complaint, but if I had to summarize what those gripes amount to, it's that the claim death is meaningless in Dragon Ball is at best a disingenuous claim worded poorly. Over the course of the series, every single character except Hercule have died once, and I guess I should elaborate and say they've all died at least once. I've gathered here all the deaths of the major characters, which by my count is 33, and I want to go over each of them and determine if they're meaningless or not. This isn't going to be in chronological order or anything, so if you want to know my opinion on a certain death, you can just skip to that part in the video using the chapters down below. Now, of course, meaningless itself can mean different things, but let's be reasonable here and define a meaningless death as one that doesn't further the development of a character or any relevant cast member, one that doesn't push the plot forward or doesn't at the very least take the plot in a different direction, or lastly, one that doesn't add to the world building. Basically, a death just for the sake of a death isn't going to count here. If you want an example that accomplishes none of these things, look at Piccolo's death during the Resurrection F arc retelling. This was so meaningless they didn't even bother to show the revival on screen. Using this metric, we'll find out how many of the 33 deaths were actually meaningless and give it a score. If we find out more often than not death is meaningless, then that's what the conclusion will be. Of course, if you disagree with the criteria I laid out for what makes a death have meaning, then by all means feel free to lay out your oh so mighty superior criteria in the comments. But that's about all I have to say. I do Dragon Ball analysis videos often, so if you enjoy that type of content, you should consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like on the video since it helps me out a lot. Krillin has had 3 deaths in Dragon Ball, once in OG Dragon Ball and 2 more times in the Z portion of the story, in both the Frieza and Buu arcs respectively. Krillin's death in the original series marks a tonal shift in the franchise. While it's not as drastic as the shift between the 23rd tournament and the Saiyan Arc, it's the shift where Dragon Ball became much more Dragon Ball Z and what the franchise is known for and we're all used to. This is also the first death of a major character, and it's the first and only time Goku spirals out of control. He's so blinded by his rage, he takes off after Krillin's killer without even remembering he just got done fighting in the tournament and virtually has no power left at all. So Krillin's first death gets a green checkmark as having meaning. Krillin's second death awakened the Super Saiyan in Goku. It's probably the one death that has the least need for justification in the entire series. Krillin's death in the Buu Saga, however, leaves a lot to be desired. While the anime fixes this specific problem, the deaths here are so unimportant they aren't even shown on panel, nor do they really do anything for anyone's character development. The same thing goes for everyone killed by Buu here. Android 18, Marin, Krillin, Videl, Roshi, who was on his second death, Yamcha, who is also on his second death, Ox King, Puar, and Mr. Popo. Like I said, at least the anime has enough respect for the characters to show their deaths, but the manga doesn't have that same respect. At least Toriyama makes Goku use the deaths as a method of convincing Vegeta to fuse with him, but in general by this point in the story, death isn't really all that crazy, and I think that's intentional, but I have to go over that later when I'm talking more in depth about the Buu Saga. The only reason I mentioned this all here was because Krillin's third death was linked so closely to all the others. Similarly, these next 3 characters all have linked deaths: Roshi, Chiaotzu, and Shenron. Chiaotzu's death here has about the same meaning it does in the Saiyan Arc, just without the immediate consequences, which is that Tien is now going to sacrifice his life to defeat the bad guy, and I gotta say I enjoyed the Saiyan Arc's execution of it more there. Not only did Tien actually give his life, but how quickly it went down definitely helps, and it pays off one of the first things we learned about the Tri-Beam as an ultimate move, which is that it drains the user's life force. But Tien doesn't get some type of development off of this, and since Chiaotzu's death is grouped with everyone else's, I kind of think that's the only reason you can even argue he expanded the world building. In reality, it's Shenron and Master Roshi's deaths that caused Goku to want to revive Shenron, because those are people he knows. In the original manga, Goku has never even talked to Chiaotzu, so I'm afraid his death both here and in the Saiyan arc is meaningless. As much as I hate to say it, Roshi also kinda died for no reason. I appreciate the statement he made with his death and the confidence he exuded with it, but I fail to see how the arc doesn't play out almost the exact same way without him dying. The scene with Tien training to master the Mafuba becomes just a bit better and give a feeling of a higher chance of likelihood if Roshi is teaching him to do it, and maybe Roshi could help find a way to use it without giving up your own life, with Tien, who is a prodigy in his own eyes. Even if Piccolo does end up killing Shenron, the mere fact that Krillin is still dead would cause Goku to go to the Heavenly Realm seeking to revive Shenron, so I'll label this death also. And since I brought it up in the past two deaths, you can probably already tell that I'm going to say Shenron's death was meaningful because it expands the world building. This is what prompts Goku to go to the Heavenly Realm and meet with God. That leads to Goku being trained there as well, which goes into some things in the next arc. But it also fits in with the theme of the story, that being self-improvement. No matter how strong you are, there is always someone stronger, so you should never stop improving. Shenron's death pushes the plot forward and expands the world building in a way that would be all too consistent moving forward, which is the ever-changing God hierarchy, and it all starts here with Kami himself. To catch everyone up to speed, out of the 14 deaths we've gone over so far, 11 of them were virtually pointless. I guess at this point I should mention having a death to elicit an emotional reaction from your viewers of a story is fine. I don't have an issue with that, but it's a bit hard for me to tell when that is effective, especially when I'm trying to be the most objective that I can when it comes to that. Personally, I was pretty sad when I saw Roshi die for the first time, and his dying words are also extremely cool. So I personally say his death had meaning for that alone. It's so incredibly subjective, I doubt anyone would want to hear me go over it that way. Goku's death at the beginning of the Saiyan arc allows for all kinds of different development and world building, but the most relevant things that result from this are Piccolo being able to take Gohan to go train, in the introduction to the other world, and expanding the God hierarchy by introducing us to King Kai, who would work as Goku's mentor for this arc in preparation for the Saiyans. It also goes to show us Piccolo's development as a character. We already know Piccolo isn't exactly the same as he was in OG Dragon Ball, but the fact that he of the Demon Clan could kill Goku and Goku could not be stuck in limbo meant he was no longer the Demon King he used to be for sure now. Yamcha is another character that died multiple times. I've already been over his second death and why that didn't matter, but his first death was pretty wild. Yamcha just got done beating the Cyberman down, not to a bloody pulp by any means, but he beat him enough that it was convincing that he won. But Vegeta had told the Cybermen not to hold back, and we find out what that really means when the Cyberman blows up along with Yamcha. I almost want to say this death has meaning just because of the iconic pose attached to it, but honestly, if it wasn't clear enough now, the fight these guys signed up for is one to the death. And I can appreciate that despite the overwhelming power level advantage, everyone's level-headed and calm attitudes, excluding Piccolo, almost make this seem like a game. And in fact, the chapter where the Cybermen come out is called Vegeta's Game. The way these guys get quickly dealt with by Tien and then Yamcha beating up on one only further served that feeling of ease. Our guys trained for this. They were ready for the threat, and then boom, Yamcha is blown up and all of a sudden they're fighting for their lives. Just to kill a few birds with one stone here, I think you can go ahead and group Tien's death in here as well, but I'm going to stick to my guns that Chiaotzu's death was useless, even though you could say it furthered what I'm talking about and how serious the situation was, but I disagree, because Chiaotzu has never done anything, and he didn't do anything here, he just hops right into this self-sacrifice play. Chiaotzu has never beaten anyone impressive, he has never been hyped up as having a secret move, and even though you can kind of say the same thing about Yamcha, at least Yamcha beat up a Cyberman first, so his death came as more of a shock. So since Chiaotzu barely even has a character, and he has never done anything impressive, I'm concluding this to still be a meaningless death. Piccolo obviously has the saddest death here, and that comes from the building of him and Gohan's relationship over the course of the last few chapters. While I disagree at large with the fact that Piccolo is Gohan's real dad and that stupid criticism, I also see the value in their relationship, and Toriyama gets points for the subversion of expectations. We all knew Piccolo would die around this time, because Kami told us that in a year it would happen. But to think Piccolo, who was once pure evil, would go out protecting a scared little boy is 100% not what I or anyone probably thought would happen. This is what sparks Gohan wanting to go to Namek. His training with Piccolo got him to stand up to Chi-Chi, and without Piccolo's training, Gohan likely never becomes a fighter. Since we're done with the deaths of the Saiyan Arc now, just to get everyone caught back up to speed, we've now got 12 useless deaths out of the 19 we've covered. In this next saga, that being Frieza, there's tons of deaths, but not really on the side of the good guys. The only two good guys that died, or I guess I should say that are directly killed, are Krillin, who I've gone over, and Dende. Other than that, there is Elder Guru, who isn't directly murdered, but still dies as a result of Frieza's actions, and Vegeta dies as well, but he is 100% not a good guy. Beyond that, Toriyama starts to play with stuff a little dark this time around. Of course, we know the Saiyan's homeworld and race were wiped out by something, but there's no telling what that is by this point. We're led to believe it's a meteor, but here we get introduced to genocide, both up close and personal with the Namekians, and as a reveal for what really happened to the Saiyans all those years ago. I'm not gonna go babbling off about the Namekians who were senselessly slaughtered here, as heartless as it is to say. They kinda just exist here to give the bad guys something to kill that aren't our main cast. So I guess you could say their deaths aren't meaningless for that reason, but they aren't even on the list of death I counted up as major, so it doesn't really matter to the grand scope of the video, but I wanted to bring it up just to talk about the different ways death is kind of handled in each arc or saga, if you will. Since I've already covered Krillin's death, that just leaves us with 4 other deaths to cover. Guru, I guess, is the most simple here, since his death not only saves a wish for later, it directly stops Vegeta from obtaining immortality, and ironically, his death that came as a result of losing all his people ended up saving his people, as the wish was used later to move all the Namekians to Earth so that they might survive their planet exploding. Dende's death only stops the Z fighters from having a healer, so effectively Frieza got rid of the medic, so any damage from here on out is permanent. I think it's cool for sure to know that Frieza can be somewhat tactical, and it's also cool for the good guys to get punished for being stupid and healing in view of Frieza this time. So we'll go for it and say Dende's death isn't meaningless. I have words about Vegeta's death, because while I think Vegeta's death is an appropriate and logical move to make when it comes to Frieza himself, he's a slimy, evil bastard. Shooting the man he just beat up while he's off guard and on the floor is 100% something Frieza would do. But when it comes to Vegeta, I struggle to find how he wouldn't be the exact same from just being beat up and left on the floor here. He's going to be alive again by the time everyone is moved from Namek to Earth anyway, and I guess maybe it could explain why he spent a year and a half on Earth following Namek's explosion just sitting around chilling. But by the time we see him again when Frieza invades, he's acting the same way he always has, and when the androids show up, he outright claims to be pure evil again. I guess his death gives Goku a cool character moment when he buries his enemy, but honestly that doesn't give it meaning for me, so I'm going to label Vegeta's death on Namek as meaningless. I have some interesting things to say about the deaths in the Cell Saga. For one, the only people who die here of note are Goku, Android 16, and Trunks, and for good reason. The story starts with a guy from the future warning about the deaths of all the Z fighters, and they train in order to prevent them. The fighters who are immune to the violence from that future being Goku, who died of a heart virus, Android 16, who simply didn't exist in that future world, and Trunks, who was only a baby when the androids show up, are promptly killed by the conflict this time around, although they avoid death for the majority of the story and only give in at the end. I rather like that. Trunks' death sent Vegeta flying off the handle, and Gohan gets injured from having to save him, and then being outdone by Gohan coupled with Goku's death makes Vegeta not even want to fight anymore and keeps him relatively peaceful for the next 7 years while Goku is off in Afterlife. Oh, and King Kai dies as well for no real reason, so yeah, another meaningless one. Goku's death here doesn't confuse me, but it's more the reason he chooses to stay dead that confuses me. He claims Bulma told him in some off-panel conversation that he attracts bad guys, and to summarize, he's saying he's staying dead because Gohan can handle any threats to Earth now, and if he's not there, maybe bad guys won't come either. I think I understand maybe what Bulma was trying to say to Goku, but other than that, Goku does not attract bad guys. I'm going to assume here that Bulma said this to Goku sometime before the Cell fight, just so I can include all the bad people Goku has fought. The majority of them were not directly after him. The Red Ribbon Army were looking for the Dragon Balls and Goku got in their way. King Piccolo was after all martial artists. Raditz does come to Earth for Goku, however, that one is fair enough. Vegeta and Nappa come for the Dragon Balls, and Goku came to Namek himself to the bad guys. Now, you might be thinking I left some people out there, and I did, but on purpose. Piccolo Jr. came for Goku to get revenge, Frieza came to Earth to get revenge, and the entire plot of the Android arc is about getting revenge for what Goku did to the Red Ribbon Army and its destruction. So in every case when a bad guy came for Goku, it was because they were trying to get revenge for Goku foiling their evil plans. And if that's the case, then it's a reason Goku should stay alive so he can keep foiling evil people's plans. I think what Bulma meant to Goku is that he's always dealing with and having to deal with bad guys, as in it's always a part of his life, not that they directly come for only Goku. But I don't know, maybe she did mean it the other way. Now, I've already gone over most of the deaths that happened in the Buu Saga when I talked about Krillin earlier, but there are still more to cover, and I have a decent bit to say about how death is handled in this arc. For the most part, death in the Buu Saga is handled with the least bit of care, and I think that's because of the sheer volume of people dying here. Goku spends most of the arc dead anyway, but still interacting with everyone, which, while this was done back in original Dragon Ball with Grandpa Gohan, this implementation is far more dragged out and sort of breaks the walls down between Otherworld and the living world, and there are a few things like this in this arc. Goku goes to Supreme Kai's world after being unable to stay in the living world for any longer to interact with Gohan, who's already there. This is the first time we see a Kai in the living world in general when Supreme Kai and Kibito come to the tournament at Earth. Old Kai gives his life so Goku can come back to Earth. Vegeta is given his body back against the normal rules of the afterlife just for another chance to take out Majin Buu, which of course leads to Goku fusing with a dead guy. All these things serve to make Dragon Ball's universe a lot bigger than it used to seem, but it's all at the cost of death really not having any meaning anymore. Before this arc, the most the dead did with the living was talk to them, and it wasn't normally a phone call, it was to share important information. Those barriers are gone in this arc, and with it, so does the need for restraint when it comes to the demise of certain characters. In this arc, the only people who don't die are Supreme Kai, Dende, Hercule, and his dog. Everyone else either started the arc dead or were dead by the end of it anyway. This arc is also the first time there isn't some new elaborate way to bring the characters back to life. Now it's as simple as we have the Dragon Balls, go ahead and make the wish. And while you can kinda say this started with Trunks, but Trunks was only able to even be revived because earlier in the arc, Goku went and found a new god for Earth to make Dragon Balls with new features. Let me explain what I mean in a little bit more detail. Goku, in order to revive his friends in the original Dragon Ball, had to go meet literal God and get him to revive the wish-granting dragon, and in return, he was not allowed to see his newly revived friends for 3 years, i.e. until the next World Martial Arts tournament, while he trained with Kami in preparation for the next time Piccolo attacked. So it wasn't as simple as making the wish, there was a lot that had to be done in order for that to happen. I don't count collecting the Dragon Balls as an obstacle, by the way. Not only do they have a radar to track them down, but after the first time the Dragon Balls are collected, the most you're going to find is them in random places now. There's no time for them to have been collected long ago and passed down in a family or something. I mean, in the Frieza saga, Mr. Popo collects all the Dragon Balls off screen. After the Saiyan invasion, since Piccolo is gone and Kami along with him, the gang has to travel across the universe to go find another set of Dragon Balls in order to revive their fallen friends, and even gathering them there has its own trials that they have to go through. After Guru falls, King Kai has to ask Kami to make the wish on the Dragon Balls worded a specific way so that Guru can be revived and therefore they can get another wish on the Namekian Dragon Balls. There's no real need for revival in the Cell arc outside of the humans who were killed by Cell and Trunks, which has Goku travel to Namek and find a new guide for Earth, like I said earlier. In the Buu Saga, these things don't really happen. Vegeta kills people, so they gather the Dragon Balls and wish those people back to life. But things do change, admittedly, whenever the Earth is blown up, because the Namekian Dragon Balls have received an upgrade and can now do multi-res. This isn't exactly the same as I was talking about in the other examples, because this is just an upgrade done off screen. There's no journey or loopholes to getting to this. Things just happen to work out in the favor of the good guys because Namekians did this upgrade before. Even if, hypothetically, they didn't do this upgrade off screen, we saw Dende upgrade the Dragon Balls on Earth immediately. So the Elder Namek should just be able to do that here. It's not exactly the same. My point is, death in the Buu Saga is seen as sending you to another spot in the universe rather than a character meeting their end. That being said, at least one death stands tall above them all, and that's Vegeta. Vegeta's death furthers his own character development here. He's a bad guy, he's caused all this to happen, and while that is true multiple times beforehand, Vegeta has never taken accountability for it and taken the steps, or at least tried to take the steps to make it right. And although it didn't do what it was expected to do, you can still find meaning in it. I will say though, Goten, Trunks, and Gohan dying all have meaning because if they were alive together with Goku, they could have easily defeated Kid Buu. But other than those deaths, every other death in this arc was virtually pointless. So if you've been keeping score the entire time, there are 18 deaths with meaning in Dragon Ball out of the 33 we've covered, meaning that at least percentage wise, deaths in Dragon Ball have meaning more often than not. But I hope through elaborations I gave that you can see the topic is a bit more nuanced than a simple conclusion of, oh, haha, gotcha, it's more meaningless than it isn't. If you liked the video, leave a like on it and subscribe to the channel. Do videos like this often. But other than that, have a nice day.